most people who's viewing this video would have an understanding of who he was, but just do a brief breakdown to set the historical record and proper perspective before I get into my personal interaction with David. Um, so he was convicted of 6 counts of second-degree murder and 7 counts of attempted second-degree murder, 1 stabbing and 13 shootings. I don't know if he was convicted of everything he did, but he was convicted of 6 counts of second-degree murder and 7 counts of attempted murder in the second degree in New York City. He lived in Yonkers. Yonkers is like a city in Westchester County, but it's connected to the North Bronx. So you could take the train to 231st Street, like the 2 train, and you get off right there and you just walk a couple of blocks and you're in Yonkers. So it's right there connected to the Bronx, like the North Bronx, because Bronx is a big borough. You got the South Bronx, and which is a pretty rough, rugged neighborhood, but you've always also had relatively really nice areas in certain parts of the borough of the Bronx. Excuse me. I've been having some kind of stomach problems lately. Got to go see the doctor about it. So this occurred between 1975 and 1977, and he was arrested on August 10th, 1977. And he received 14 counts of 14 consecutive 25-year to life sentences, 25 years to life. He received 14 consecutive sentences like that. So, in all practicability, he has life without parole. He's been going up for parole now for about the last 10 years. Now, obviously, he'll never make a parole date. It's just not going to happen in New York because the case is too infamous and just too much notoriety. They'll never let him out, and I'm sure that David has come to terms with that. My experiences with David Berkowitz. If there's anyone who has actually converted to Christianity, it's David Berkowitz. I did those 10 months in the same housing unit with him. He's a relatively small guy. He doesn't look necessarily dangerous or imposing at all. And with my experiences with David, I would say, and I know, you think about a guy like a mass murderer, serial killer, you would think of like some really abrasive guy. But in my experiences with David, he was actually a genuinely nice guy who felt a extreme amount of remorse for what he did. He was an authentic born-again Christian. He wasn't faking the funk. He knows he's never getting out of jail. It's just not going to happen. And I honestly feel in those 10 months that I did with him, I didn't really get to know him well, but I got to know him a little bit in passing. I had several conversations with him. A little bit about Sullivan Correctional Facility and the way it's constructed. It's a unique correctional facility in the state of New York because the great majority of maximum security facilities in the state of New York are like the old James Cagney gangster movies, very similar to what you're looking at behind me. One-man cells, long ranges like this, and most of them were 4 or 5 stories tall. So you have the flats is what they're called, and then you would have company 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But Sullivan's not built on that model. It's a 2-story facility. It has pretty large cells by New York State standards. It's made out of cinder block or concrete, unlike most of the other cells in New York State, which is all made out of metal with the open bar design. Um, so it was a pretty mellow, relaxed facility, and I've drawn a little diagram of Sullivan just to put things in proper perspective. So here, unlike any other facility in New York State, you would have a sally port. So you would come down a hallway when you went on program runs or yard runs and stuff like that, and you would door would open here. You would go into the door, 5 or 6 or 8 prisoners at a time. That door would close, another door would open. All right, and then you would go into the pod. Now, unlike most correctional facilities in New York State, if you don't have somewhere to be, you're in your cell. Now, you can have a lot of things in your cell that you wouldn't have, you know, and a lot of other prisons around the country, guitars, typewriters, radios, headphones. At that time, it was tapes. You could have up to 25 cassette tapes. I'm sure they got tablets and whatnot now, but in this facility, you had all these tables. So they only really locked you down for count. Other than that, you was out and about, you know. So you had all these tables, and different groups would sit at the tables, and they brung the food to the housing unit, which is another unique aspect of Sullivan and Shawanga. They're built along the same model. I was never in Shawanga, but I was in Sullivan. So you got like a CO's bubble here. No, excuse me, the CO's bubble here. And if you get on keep lock, they would let you, and keep lock is where you're confined to your cell, but whatever you did is not serious enough to go to the hole or the shoe or the box. That's what the hole is commonly referred to as in New York State, the box. So you would come in, and if it wasn't count time, you could just go and sit at a table or go to your cell. The cells are open unless it was count time. So you could go in and out of your cell. So it was a very, even though it was a super max, I guess that would technically be the classification of it. They didn't really run it like that, but they could take it there in a heartbeat because the food came to the housing unit, and they would deliver it here in like hot boxes, and they fed you really good there. And you could always go back for seconds, sometimes thirds, because there was a lot of food. And the people who served the food wasn't ground balls, because that type of thing just wouldn't be tolerated. There was plenty enough food for everybody. So you would just get your tray. You would line up, get your tray, and go and sit wherever you wanted to and eat. I mean, not really wherever you wanted to. Every kind of group had their own little table, but it was a very mellow environment. I don't know no other way to describe it. And then you had like the closets and stuff. You had showers. And so you had the CO like little platform right here. And then behind there, you had like a glassed in partition. And on the back of it, you had like thick, like, you know, like the dog run fence. You ain't getting out of it. But if you was on keep lock, they would take you over there for your hour rec, which there weren't very many people ever on keep lock. But if you get a tier 2 for, you know, smuggling something or having an altered item or whatever, they might put you on keep lock for 5 or 10 days. There were very few fights there. And thinking about it, I don't really think I ever saw a stabbing there because it was a very small facility. And they just didn't see necessarily troublemakers there, but you had a lot of really high-profile prisoners there. It was far from like any kind of protective custody or special needs yard. It was an outright general population prison. A lot of high-profile prisoners doing a lot of time, and then what they would do is sprinkle in people doing 3 to 6s, 4 to 9s, 5 to 10s. So you don't have a whole bunch of hardcore lifers. It kind of breaks it up a little bit. But it was actually a very mellow facility for the type of facility it was. I just wanted to put that in proper context. During my 10 months with David, and the reason why I honestly think he is a legitimate born again Christian, not just faking the funk. If you got keep locked in New York State, they give you a commissary sheet every 2 weeks, and you get paid every 2 weeks. Or you can go to commissary every 2 weeks if you got money from the streets. So if you have a prison job, you'll get paid every 2 weeks. If you was on keep lock, or David knew you wasn't doing well, or you didn't have money, he would come to your cell, man. Like if you was on keep lock, he wouldn't even ask you nothing. He would come to your cell, and they sell little things of ice cream, and he would come to your cell and say, "Hey, man, how you doing today, man?" And he never pushed no Bible thumping. I ain't gonna put something on the guy that I didn't personally experience. Everybody knew he was a real born again Christian, but he wasn't the type of guy who was always talking about Jesus and trying to push it on you. If you expressed any kind of interest in it, he'd definitely take you up on the offer and be willing to talk about the Bible with you. He had a tremendous amount of knowledge. And I would say, if, separated from the horrible crimes he committed, I would actually say with my personal interactions with David Berkowitz, he was actually a hell of a nice guy. I know that sounds crazy to say something like that about a guy who's in prison for that, but he never talked about his crimes. He would go out of his way not to talk about it. If anybody tried to talk about it with him, he'd say, I think I heard him once say, I think I heard him say something like along the lines when somebody tried to bring it up once or twice. I don't dwell in the past, brother. I don't dwell in the past. What's done's done. It can't be undone. I just don't dwell in the past. I live in the here and now. He would say things like that. On the few occasions it was brung up. He would come to your cell if you was on keep lock and give you ice cream, a couple of stamps so you could write your family. If he knew you was doing bad, he's the type of guy who would come and give you a couple of crackhead soups, or ramen noodles, We call them crackhead soups in New York. I'm sure they call them crackhead soups in other places also, but ramen noodles. He was just a hell of a nice guy, and nobody messed with David. Nobody tried to pull no funny stuff on David because he was a much older guy by the time I met him. Definitely like his mid-50s, and I was like in my mid-30s. I was more young and rambunctious. The reason why I didn't stay in Sullivan, because I refused to sign the waiver while I was agreed to stay in a 2-man cell, which was a mistake because what happened was they got mad at me and sent my ass to Attica, and that's a whole nother type of jail, and I'll get into that maybe on another episode. But in my personal experience dealing with David, I think he was truly sorry for what he did. And I think if there is such a thing as demon possession, I'm not a demonologist, so, I guess all that's up for debate, but I think he probably was suffering from some kind of real mental illness where he thought something or somebody was talking to him. And he did what he did because he suffered from some kind of possession or demonic possession or suffered from some kind of mental illness. Him and I never talked about that because he was just a little guy, kind of balding at that time. I think he shaved his head since now because he probably lost all of his hair and it went gray. But at that time, he still had like a little bit of salt and pepper hair. He was had a bald spot in the back. A little like guy he had a little pop belly. And he was just a really, again, from my perspective, and when I interacted with him, numerous times, because he's in the same block with me, and he's a white guy, and he kind of did his own thing. He had his own little study church group that he was always in, and he got tons of mail. A lot of it from, I would imagine churches and whatnot, because he was really on it, and I'm sure he had fan mail also, but he just didn't never strike me as the type of guy who would write somebody back who wanted to talk about gory details of his crimes, numerous. He never really struck me as that kind of guy. I never heard him glorifying anything to do with his crimes. He's probably the kind of guy you could let out of prison and he would never, ever even commit another crime, never jaywalk. I honestly do think he was demon-possessed or suffering some really type of serious mental illness. And I'm not saying that excused the crimes he committed. By no way does it excuse that. And definitely he has to pay for what he did. And his payment will be to live and die, in prison. I would imagine now he's been in prison for about, I don't know, going on 50 years, maybe 50 plus. 77, 87, 97, 2007, to 2017, to 2026. I mean, yeah, about 50 plus years. He's been in there a long time. And I think they shipped him to Shawanga now, because Shawanga and Sullivan are very similar type of facilities. There was a little saying back in the day. Sullivan was like the honor version, and Shawanga was more of the punishment version, because in Shawanga, the front of the cell in Sullivan was a cinder block with a door like this, like a barred door, and it would slide open, okay? And it would leave it open if it wasn't count time. Sullivan had a cinder block wall, same thing as Shawanga had a cinder block wall, the same thing as Sullivan, but half of it was clear plexiglass, so the officer could always see in there. So it was more like a punishment version, I think probably a little bit more rowdy. And the Son of Sam, I mean, in my personal willings and, dealings in that 10-month or so period, I would say the guy was really remorseful for what he did. He was a real born-again Christian. He wasn't faking the funk, that's for sure. And he was a really likable guy. If you didn't know what he was in prison for, and you just met him in the block, let's say you were blind to what he had did to be there, your first impression would be he's just like a little roly-poly guy, not threatening at all. And if you had any dealings with him, you would probably walk away from him saying, yeah, that guy's like a really intelligent, very nice guy, until you knew what he was there for, and then maybe your opinion would change. But definitely no one was bothering David. No funny business was afoot. The cops actually really liked David. He had, free run of the church. I wouldn't say he ran the church, but I definitely think he was very influential down there. I would say he was a man of God, of Jesus. He was, and at that time I was still wandering aimlessly about religion and whatnot. Since then, I've become more of a pagan. I definitely think there's a God out there. I'm not 100% sure what it is, but some people would say a Gnostic. I think there's many gods, okay, not just one. And I know a lot of people will disagree with me on that, and that's fine. But at that time, I was like religion neutral. And then to a large part, I still kind of am today. I think there's many gods, and personally, I'm just not going to waste my time praying to a God that doesn't have the respect for me to answer my prayers. A God gets their power from your prayers. And why would I pray to somebody who doesn't take the time back to answer my prayers? So, I might pray to one God today. I might pray to another God tomorrow, depending on who's willing to listen to my prayers and answer them. But that definitely wasn't the case with David. Now, again, he wasn't a Bible thumper. He never tried to push religion on anyone, and I respect him for that. But he was really a born-again Christian. If I've ever met a born-again Christian in prison, I would say he's right at the top of the list. And no means that am I suggesting that that would excuse the horrible crimes he committed when he was on that rampage between 75 and 77, 1975, 1977. But I would say most of the lives he's touched while he's been in prison, he's probably made more of a positive impact um, than a negative impact. And I know that may be hard to believe from, certain people, who've never met the guy. Yeah, but from my personal experience, he was just a really nice guy, man. So I won't talk your ear off anymore. I just wanted to do this episode, a little episode. Try to do an episode every day or two. I work, I got other things going on, but this channel's on up, and we're going to keep it going up, and we do the hard dive, hard reporting that other people just can't do because they don't know the stories to tell or they're not willing to touch certain topics. My position as far as SHU Outdoors is concerned is that ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News, and other news outlets can report on it. I can report on it too. And I can tell my truth the way I see any given circumstances. Generally speaking, I don't use people's names when I'm telling stories unless I feel it's appropriate and it's justified. I don't just go around disrespecting people and whatnot. So I'm a little bit more sensitive in that regard to say ABC or CBS or one of the big news networks would be. But there's no topics that I find off limits or too taboo to speak on or report on. Because I feel I owe that to my viewers and my subscribers. And again, every one of my subscribers means the world to me, man. And we're going to build this together as a team from the ground up. I have no doubt we can do it. It may not be an easy overnight process, but anything worth having is worth working for. And I'm willing to put the hard work in, bring you real, from my perspective and my point of view, reporting and dialogue on any number of different topics that I've seen